I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey, and this is episode 2 of viewer game analysis in AZUL. Apologies for having neglected my AZUL content a little bit for the last couple of months, so this is due to the ongoing World Team Carcassonne Online Championships. But as we're approaching the playoffs, and in fact there are only 2 weeks remaining in the championships, there's just the semifinals and finals remaining, to which you should absolutely tune in tomorrow and the day after and next week. But because we have now fewer teams, I have a bit more time to do this. Also, I have made some footage, which I'm looking forward to edit. So the plan is to have more AZUL content in the upcoming few weeks, hopefully. And some AZUL content, of course, right now. I am particularly excited about this episode because normally when we do these analysis series, both in AZUL and Carcassonne, very often the content that we have is kind of heavily focused on really advanced stuff and like very high rated players, and we're gonna have a bit of that too. But for the first time, we're gonna have the full spectrum. I'm gonna look at 3 games, and the lowest rated player in the game, in one of the games involved, is rated 100, and the highest rated player is rated 938, which is, I think, number 5 in the world or something like this. So there's going to be a bit for everybody. I'm going to leave the most interesting game for the end. And I'm going to start with game number 1, sent to us by Devaka. Hi, Devaka, in the chat, by the way. And here we're playing against the Korean player with the screen name Blue Arrow. Now, the rating of our protagonist is between 550 and 600 at the time of play. And the rating of our opponent is something like 750. So we're playing against a master. So we are getting out-traded, and our opponent gets to start first. Let's have a look at this board and see some interesting options from their perspective. Now, we see a lot of blues here. There are 6 blues, and you kind of really want to go for the standard move of blues in column 3. But because there's so many blues, there's not particular urgency in going for row 3. Our opponent does something which I think is really good. They take 2 whites for the row 4, and the most important idea with their move is that they're creating a threat. A very clear threat of taking the more rare element, the whites, and then trying to finish their row 4. And we can't really respond all that well to it. So let's say if we want to prevent their threat, if we're going to take these whites for ourselves, first of all, there's the issue where exactly we're going to take them, because there are only 2 whites remaining, we cannot create a counter threat of our own. We could go for row 2, of course, but it's not a great color to go for row 2 because we'll be headed for column 1, and the other elements available here are really not conducive for developing column 1, especially all of these blues. So we should be really focusing on these here columns a little bit more. And also in general, we don't want to place whites here or here, because unless you have like a very good mathematical precise calculation reason, you want to just be creating threats all the time. And if you take on your very first move whites somewhere else, then you're just committed to having that row a bit clogged for this round. So what we want to do is maybe we want to allow them to complete row 4 and just make a counter threat. My first instinct is to start taking away their blues and maybe go for something like row 4, not even row 3. So let's say if we take blues here, and if they take the whites, they go here, right? And then we take more blues, and we go here, and we complete row 4. But then there is the problem that now 3 blacks are going to be grouped, and then now going to go here, and then they're going to have very nice synergy for the bottom rows of column number 5. So that is not ideal, really. So we could also take the starting player, like just take the 1 red and make a bit of a waiting move, but that's also not ideal because our opponent's going to take the whites here And while they have 4 tiles productively placed, we have only 1. We can probably do something with the blues, but they will be able to develop either their row 3 with blues or row 5 with whites. So I'm thinking that we should go for a counter threat and start taking away one of their key colors. And the color I'm thinking is actually this black here. A move that I like quite a lot is going over here with black for row 4 for a variety of reasons. So let me actually just put that on the board. Well, oh wait, I'm not sure if I can even do that. Let's see if the system's going to allow me. Nah, not really. Okay, whatevs. But imagine if the blacks are here. Then our opponents cannot really take the whites productively. I mean, if they do, they give us these blues very nicely together. We can take them over here for row 2, for example. And if we group those 2 blues together, then suddenly, instead of 4 rather symmetrical groups of 2 groups of 2 and 2 groups of 1, they're now going to be only 3 groups, and it's a bit awkward because ideally what they want to do, they want to keep blues separate for as long as possible so that they can fill in this here row efficiently. If we take the blacks here and just put that blue in the center, then there's really not that great of a response that they can have. So for example, if they take the whites, well, we just looked at this. We have 2 blues grouped together, and there's plenty of things that we can do with those. If they take the blues, then there's a big problem. If they take either of the blues, then they will be grouping 2 blacks together in the center for us to continue our row 4. And then if they take the starting player, then we're kind of happy because we can proceed doing all kinds of nasty things. We can take whites away from them. We can start taking blues away from them, and there is sufficient synergy that we're going to have between row 4 and row 5 because there technically still 2 reds available that we can put here, just sufficient enough for the first round. Then we can also preserve the threat of completing row 4 until the end of the round, because after we take these 2 blacks, there are going to be 3 blacks remaining, and so it will be awkward for our opponent to take pretty much anything from any of these 2 plates because they want to be avoiding grouping the remaining 2 blacks for us together. So with all these factors is the strongest response that I see. I want to pay special attention to the first move of the game, and or maybe the first 2 moves of the game, because typically this is the one where it's most easy to make a strategic mistake. And then after this, the round very often sort of kind of plays itself. And typically what you want to do, you want to have these positional considerations as try to imagine how the rows could look when you complete them, and most importantly, what kind of threats you can pose and what threats your opponent can pose. So let's see what we did. We start with the blues, which is okay. I do think it's not that strong precisely because it allows our opponent to take the blacks really quickly, and they just have a good position now. Now we can also continue. We can take the whites, of course, and that looks just as good, but they are a bit ahead on the column that they're building, so they're going to have a slight advantage as well. So you see, they continue with the blacks. Now we're also faced with a pretty interesting choice. Now, of course, we cannot continue with the bottom, but what exactly can we do? Well, my first instinct tells me to go here and just continue our row 3. And because there will be still multiple groups available, we will have just enough stuff for our row 2. And after we place these blues on row 3, they are only good things for our row 2. So either the other 2 blues or the 3 golds, which fit here perfectly. In some cases, even the 2 reds if they get grouped together. And of course, the 1 black can go at the top. Yeah, actually, I don't necessarily see any other moves here. I was thinking also to just go here with the black to go for the standard tactic, but in this here moment, we're not interested in the standard tactic. First of all, discarded tiles don't matter that much in round 1 because you can't go below 0. And second, we actually want to get more stuff on our board in round 1, not less. So we'd rather be the one who are finishing this round than our opponent. Here you take the gold, which also makes sense, but I don't think that's the priority because you are sacrificing your row 3. They also will be sacrificing row 3, and I see where you're coming from. But, if you were to take these 2 blues, and if they were to attempt gold on their row 3, if they were to go here, then they would actually lose their advantage pretty quickly because there's no way how they can complete all their 3 top rows. So imagine this. So if you were to take these 2 blues, imagine the blues here, right? And imagine if the 3 gold are on opponent's row 3. Then the move here that you make is you take the black here. This row is, of course, empty because the gold are on our opponent. And then the remaining tile groups are 2 blues and 2 reds, which means that you're guaranteed to fill in your row 2 productively. And your opponent has only 1 move, so they can either fill row 2 or row 1. So this one appears to be a miscalculation on your part. So one lesson here is that we shouldn't be too afraid of leaving nice looking groups for our opponent in round 1. If we can calculate that we can group enough tiles together so that we don't allow them too many moves. Now, what our opponent does, it's also understandable. They go here. And you see, now we have a bit of a problem. Now we cannot complete everything. So we do sacrifice our row 3. So do they. But we had a chance of getting quite a sizable advantage there with 3 rows completed against 2. Yeah, of course, we do this. And now they go for their only move and complete their row 2. However, in their perspective, since they're also the starting player, I would have seriously considered sacrificing row 2 here. Just because these blues fit so well in the center. And it seems to me that that tile efficiency is worth a little bit more than the attempt to salvage row 1 and 2 at all costs. I know that it's something that I've been speaking a lot about, that you want to prioritize rows 1 and 2 whenever possible without compensation. But in this case, you would get very clear compensation, a lot of progress towards this column, and still technically, if you want to have the bonus for a completed row, it's still possible to complete row 3, albeit more expensive. So it's something I would quite consider here as our opponent. I'm not sure if I pull the trigger on it, but what I would do if I'm not playing a tournament game, if I'm playing a casual game or an arena game, something that has low stakes, I would just try this out of experiment and see how the game turns out. High Glavier. Yeah, so our opponent just prioritizes the top 2 rows. And we get a position which is actually not that bad. So we have 1 point extra. Our opponent is having himself the starting player advantage. They also have 2 extra productively placed tiles and nice synergy at the bottom. We have better synergy at the top. And they have slightly worse synergy at the top, but it's not something that is completely unsalvageable. There are plenty of ways how they can build up efficiently. Overall, a slight advantage here for the Korean player. Now they get the starting choice of round 2, and of course they're going to take the 2 whites to continue their own row 4 and to deny us our row 4. And here, it's not an easy choice, because we want to follow the principle of taking the most valuable tile group for us and our opponent. And there isn't a particularly valuable tile group for our opponent because they have completed the main objectives in this round. There are plenty of blacks for them to finish row 5. In theory, we could take away the gold from them, but there's still plenty of gold for them to put here in row 2. So there's just no particular damage that we can inflict on them. I guess the best option that I see is maybe just taking the starting player with this 1 gold, simply for the sake of taking the starting player, or just start collecting blacks on row 5. I wouldn't go for a blue here simply because we have 3 options and it's not necessarily the priority here. So you do take the starting player, which makes a lot of sense. They decide to fill in their row 2 as soon as possible before all the groups get in the center. And now probably it's a good idea to start collecting things for row 5. Okay, this is also fine. My slight concern about this, if we take the blues, even though it's completely reasonable because they also need their blues for row 3, we don't want them to get grouped in the center too easily. My slight concern is that they could start taking blacks away from this, because now that we've taken the blues away and they don't have anything reasonable they can place in row 3, I just want to real quick calculate out the variation. What happens if they take the 2 blacks here? Then I assume we take the reds here, they take 1 black anywhere. Yeah, they can just end up with a lot of black on their board, and we can get our column delayed, and then they can also start threatening the complete color if they manage to get 3 blacks here. So just because their row 3 is so flexible, they could use it for defense rather than for advancing their own column. Because for their own column, they only need 3 blues. In fact, our opponent is not short for blues at all, because for this standard setup, they only need 4 blues in total. 1 for row 1, eventually, to complete the top row, and 3 over here. And for anything else, they don't really need these here blues, so they can totally delay their row 3 and do something else with it entirely. So here I would probably, and that's why if in the place of my opponent, I would not do this. I would actually go for 2 blacks on my row 3 and try to play defense. Because what this allows you to do now you can legit go for the blacks at the bottom row. And now your position is perfectly fine. You have very nice synergy. You're going to be the starting player. It's very difficult, but not impossible for your opponent to mess with your row 2. So your position is just fine. And it looks like your opponent has completed more stuff. They're going to finish row 4 and 5. But it is your setup which is more efficient, because you're completing your column. Even though you're doing it later, you're completing your column in such a way that allows you maximum efficiency, because you're going to do this first, this first, this first for 3 points. Then you're going to get 4 for this row and 5 for this row. Whereas they get 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and then 5 for when they complete row 3. So they're actually going to be losing 3 points from this here inefficiency. Your position is really good. Now, if I am the Korean player, what I'm trying to figure out here, is it possible to truly mess with your row 2? And given the fact that we cannot complete row 3, my first instinct is just to take these reds here. Then it's not really all that easy for you to do something about this, because you cannot just take 1 red for your row 2, because our opponent is going to take 1 red for their row 3. You're going to lose your row 2. They're going to complete the row 3. And the fact that they're going to get a bit more discards than you really doesn't matter. Your position is going to be pretty bad. And if I'm completely honest, I don't quite see an alternative here for them. I guess an alternative is try to pressure you on the floor line. They could allow you to complete your row 2 with reds. And they maybe could just build their row 3, just take 1 blue here. It kind of forces you to take 2 reds, although we might need to, 3 reds rather, but we might need to look at that variation in detail. And if that happens, they can apply the standard tactics and make sure that you need to discard more than them. So I would be considering one of these two moves. Instead, our opponent plays what I think is a rather weak move. It says discarding 2 reds, yeah, which is kind of nice. But no, it really doesn't achieve anything. It just gives him an extra discarded tile. So it seems that you're going to be losing some value. Because you cannot take these 2 reds in one go. But even without further calculating, I see that you're not going to lose your row 2. Because whenever you have 3 disconnected pairs, 3 or more disconnected pairs on different plates that would fit as a group on your row 2, it is mathematically impossible for your opponent to deny your row 2 with the correct play. Here's how this works. So after this move, what you got to do here is just wait and take the 1 white. And then regardless of what your opponent does, you have a very easy response. So whichever color your opponent takes, let's assume it's 1 blue, because this is what they need, then you just take the other blue and put it in the discard, and then you're going to have at least 2 groups, in this case 2 blacks and 2 reds, that fit here. So you're not going to be losing your row 2, and your opponent will have to discard at least 2 more tiles, and actually, wait, way more than this. Yeah, they will have to discard 4 more tiles. Yikes. 4 more tiles. Because they're going to have an even number of turns and you're going to have an odd number of turns. But anyway, this is the pattern that's important to remember. Like, if there are at least 3 disjointed pairs on, doesn't matter on which plates, just anywhere on the scene, then it's impossible for your opponent to deny you your row 2. Because knowing this just helps you avoid some calculation. So the correct move here is to take the 1 white, which you don't do. And I can see where you're coming from. You're trying to group things in the center. But the truth is that it's unnecessary, because you're going to discard way more tile than your opponent. So for example, the move that they can make, they can now take from this plate, and now they can apply the standard tactics, leaving 5 tiles group in the center, so that you have to take 3 of them and they have to take only 2. So you'll be discarding more than them. So that was just a calculation mistake. I really had to take this 1 white here. And now, regardless of what you do here, you're going to be discarding more tiles than them. I'm not exactly sure which one. Oh yeah, let's just see what they do first. They make a move which is completely beyond me. Well, not completely, no, it actually does make some sense. Yeah, okay, that's another way to go about it. Because now they try to disrupt your row 1, your row 2 rather, and make sure that you also complete it rather inefficiently. Because the only way for you now is to guarantee row 2 is to discard one of these 2 tiles, grouping 2 of those in the center. Yeah, that's actually a very smart move from them. And what's going to happen is that they're going to take 2 blues here, they're going to force you to take 2 blacks here, and then you'll end up not advancing your row 5, and you'll end up completing your row 2 in the most inefficient way, and they will be also able to quite well advance the row 3. It's a rather strong move. So at this point, I'm wondering, is this a crazy idea to sacrifice row 2 here for the sake of efficiency? Maybe it's not crazy. What if we take this blue here and go over here? Now, normally I don't recommend this sort of stuff, so don't try this at home, but let's see if this works out. And then they're forced to take the 1 blue and go here. Then we probably take either 1 white or 2 blacks. They discard something for us. We discard. They discard. So we end up with a missing row. They end up with 1 fewer tiles here, and they end up with more discarded tiles. Honestly, that actually might be kind of worth it. At least it's something with which I would experiment in a low-stakes game. And this appears to be one because based on the interface, it looks like an arena game. So I would consider this. I'm not sure if it's justified to sacrifice row 2 this early, but it might. Just because we get a lot of efficiency from that. And you make the natural move, which makes all the sense in the world. And what's going to happen is that it's actually not such a bad round for you. You only get 2 negative points more than them from the discarded tile. And it's also, despite some minor inefficiency, it actually helps to have your black on row 2 early enough, just because you're going to need the black elsewhere, and you're not going to end up in a position in the penultimate round where both you and your opponent will be hungry for whites and blacks, which is, of course, the tiles that you typically place last in your 2 top rows because they're at the edges. So it's certainly nice to have one of these edges filled out. This is also a pretty good run out that you have here. Now your opponent has an advantage for sure in terms of points and in terms of placed tiles, but there are plenty good things that we can do here. Certainly the first that I'm thinking is to start disrupting the blues, and if I remember correctly, you do find what I believe is the best move. It's a great move. It's super annoying. You take the 1 blue, kind of forcing them to be inefficient and sacrifice this. And now comes the question about what to do next. The intuitive move, it seems to me, is to grab the reds and just fill in row 2. But there are 3 groups of red, and I wonder if we can be a bit more efficient. One key objective, which I would really like to accomplish this round, is completing the row 4 with a bunch of whites. There's a problem that the whites are disjointed, but if we just take the starting player tile, we might solve that problem, really. Then we assume that, let's say, our opponent gets some reds, and we can get maybe 2 blacks, etc., etc. I'm also a bit concerned that our opponent might be taking our blacks away because they have actually a good spot where they can do so. But in any case, I identify that the key objective for us is to complete column 4 with the whites. I also identify, without deep calculation, that it should be pretty easy for us to complete row 2, just because there are these 3 groups of red. And even if these 3 groups of red get grouped together very quickly, typically it's going to happen at the expense of something from our opponent, and you're going to have the remaining 2 whites to go as an emergency plan to complete the second row. So let's see what you do here. You go for the blacks, which is reasonable, which is absolutely reasonable. But the thing that I don't like about these blacks is that it just gives your opponent too good of a move back. You see, so they take the whites, which is just perfect for them. They also preserve a lot of reds for the bottom row, which is their secondary threat, or at least a way to get a couple of quick points and deny you some reds. And they also get the starting player token. Now, losing the starting player token in round 3 is not such a big deal, because this means that in round 4, you're going to be second, and you're going to have the chance to grab the starting player token for round 5. And in round 5, when it matters most, you're going to be first. But based on the fact that you still are not going to have your rows 4 and 5 filled out in all likelihood, we might be a bit short on either whites on blacks, and it could be that the situation of the run out in round 4 dictates that there's like only one group that you need to grab. So I really don't like this giving back to our opponent, especially given the fact that there are still 3 blacks. So this here move was not as urgent as it seems. And second, if you are going to choose which of these rows to complete, if you can help it, you really want to complete your row 4 before row 5 for the sake of efficiency. Because again, it's just how the way points are counted. If you complete your row 4 first, you get 4. And then if you complete your row 5, then you get 5. So you get 9 in total, right? Scenario 2, we complete blacks first, we get 1 point. And then when we complete the whites in our next round, we get ourselves 5 points. So we get only 6 in total. So completing your column out of order, or completing your row out of order, can cost you up to 3 points. So now you're probably going to take one of the reds or the black. Actually, yeah, take the blacks. Red is fine, sure. And here, yeah, here that's the problem. You see, they take the white. They took all the whites away from you. So we ended up not really using the starting player advantage and not completing one of our key objectives. Here, we don't have a lot of options, do we? Well, I can see several moves. So the main problem that I'm having with this here runouts is that I'm quite likely to discard things. So now I'm start wondering, is it okay to sacrifice both of these rows and just go for the standard tactics and get 1 white? If we are to do that, then it's going to be a bit of a problem. Your opponent's going to take 4 reds, and then you're going to take 3 blacks over here, which is quite all right. But then they're going to take 2 golds, and then they're starting player, and there are a lot of golds remaining, and then suddenly they're threatening a second column on column 1. So we don't want that situation to happen. Another natural move that we can make is just take 1 black and at least complete our row 5. Even though that's going to be inefficient, we do want to clean up the row in order not to have discard a lot next round. This will allow them to take the reds, but then you can take 1 white and advance your row 4 a little bit, and then you can just place something in row 3 just to avoid a discard. And this is something that you go for, which is a completely reasonable move. They go for the thing that we expected. And they do threaten the second column regardless. But we hope that we can have just enough blacks to take column 1 away from them. We are at a considerable disadvantage, but it is a good run out for us. We still have a threat of completing another column, with our first column. From that, we're going to get 5 points, and then we have just enough blacks to clean up our row 3 and threaten something good for our row 1. To just advance our row 1. And they go for this, which is pretty interesting. Actually, this move makes a lot of sense. They're trying to force us to be inefficient when we grab one of these groups of whites. So they force us to discard and then guarantee themselves row 3. And they're also quite hesitant to go for the natural move of continuing their row 1, for row 2 rather, simply because we're not going to be taking reds away from them because we don't need them anywhere. But this allows us in any case some good options. I would here take just 1 black for our row 3, or even just row 1. You go for the blues, which also makes a lot of sense. I don't like the fact that blacks are going to be grouped together, and our opponent makes quite easily a rather obvious mistake. I don't see any good reason why they would want to grab these whites from this plate as opposed to these whites from this plate. Because the point of grabbing this whites, they would group multiple groups of blacks for us, and they will also have themselves an additional option for their row 2, because there are some scenarios how they can take 2 or even 3 blacks here just to deny us row 3, which we do need a lot for cleanup, and to deny us row 1, which we do need a lot for efficiency, and then just let us take the reds. So we're getting a bit fortunate here. And of course, you do take the whites, the blacks before they get grouped, but then they're going to discard the whites. But that's okay. Even though we're not finishing our column now, there's still enough whites in the deck. I didn't count precisely, but it looks like there's enough whites in the deck to complete our objectives. Actually, no, we do need whites in a lot of places, huh? We do need whites in a lot of places. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, so I guess what we should have done, I think we should have actually grabbed the black on our previous turn. Because the thing with blues, we're not going to run out of blues anytime soon. And if they get grouped too much, we always can threaten going with white here and with white here again. And if anything, if we are successfully going to take both groups of whites away from them, then it's actually even better for us, not only because the row 3 is clocked, but because we take the more rare type of tile for our row 2 before the last round. Yeah, so now we... Well, not... Okay, this is definitely a mistake. I don't like giving them this sort of efficiency. I would have preferred the other group of black. Because now they can just get, you see, because now they have a perfect configuration. They have this here gold here, and then the 3 gold here. But let's see how they respond to that. Well, they take this first, which also makes sense. Oh no, they don't. Well, they do make their decision. Yeah, this also makes sense. They don't want to lose their row 2. Now... It looks like a pretty obvious sequence to me. This, if there is a time to employ the standard tactic, it is absolutely this one. Now, we don't want our opponents to have easy access to rows 1 and 2. Yeah, and actually, if we do that, and I do agree with your move, then there is a different problem that our opponent can have. They can even sacrifice the row 1, and they can just go for this. And try to get some 3 blacks to finish this here row, the second column, which might not be available even. Yeah, that's the thing. So let's see what they do here. I don't want to overanalyze our opponent's moves because we're looking at this from our perspective. Yeah, everything makes a lot of sense. They do make the sacrifice. They don't want to discard too much. And so at least we're getting something out of this round. We're actually only 2 points behind. And they're not going to be successfully completing any of their things because there's so few blacks remaining. And we have just enough whites to get row 1 and row 4. So this means that it's looking good for us with one exception. Because we have 2 rows clogged, I can anticipate a lot of discards. So how do we deal with that? Well, option 1 that I'm seeing is start taking the whites 1 by 1. And then if we're careful enough, then we can create a situation where we can get this and this and this as well. Because there are just enough whites to fill all of these squares, and our opponent does not really have a good use for the whites. Another option that we can think about is the fact that we have complete control on whether they want to end the game. There are only 2 blacks remaining, and both of them are disjointed. Our opponent has already sacrificed row 1, meaning that placing something here will not finish the game. If we just discard one of these 2 blacks at some point, and then maybe we finish this, and we finish this, and we get 3 gold here, and we get like 1 white here or something like this, we can be in a decent position to try and take over the game in round 6. One good thing that can go, well, some good things that can go well for us in round 6 is the fact that we have all these blues, and then if there are 4 blues in that run out, we can threaten a complete color over here. Threatening anything else will be a bit difficult, but you know what? We can also take 4 blues here, 4 blacks here to threaten a complete color of the blacks. So if we cannot win this game now, then we can try and force the game into the 6th round. And it's quite fortunate that these 2 blacks are apart, which means that we can postpone the decision for a little bit later, whether we want to move the game into the 6th round. Hi, P-Chan. So without complete calculation, what I see, the principle that I would obey is just not to touch these 2 plates, to keep these blacks apart for as long as possible so that our opponent cannot threaten going here too easily. So my first instinct is probably just to grab 3 golds maybe. Yeah, because our opponent does need the golds. It's not the worst idea to put whites in the center because we can actually put the whites here, now try to even end the game favorably. And this is exactly what you do. Our opponents start collecting the whites, and now this is, I presume, where you make the decision to put the game into the 6th round. I mean, how exactly do we do that? Maybe we just take this 1 black and discard it. Because if we take 1 white, which we need, our opponent is now going to take the other white and group 2 blacks together and force us to discard some more. So I do like taking the 1 black here. You take the 1 white, which makes some sense, but then watch our... I don't get this. I don't get this. Why are they doing this and not the other thing? Why don't they just take the 1 white in the other place and threaten the 2 blacks? It almost seems that they're trying to provoke us into making a mistake, but I think it's not that difficult to calculate that taking this 1 white is not probably going to win us the game, or will it? Let's have a look. So if we do take the whites and put it here, then our opponent has to take the blacks. Wait, actually, do we win? Wait, this might be winning in this round. Wait. Okay, let's have a look at the moment. We're -2, -3 because of this, and we are +5 here, and +5 here. We're equal on columns. So we're actually at +7. If we take the white here for 9 points, they can take black here for 9 points, so we're equal, and we're still at +7. And then the question is, can they make 7 more points? To which the answer is maybe. So let's say if we go for the natural move after this. The natural move being the standard tactic because we want to avoid discarding at all costs. Let's say we take this 1 gold. We discard it, putting it as +6. Now we have grouped in the middle 2 golds, 3 blues, and a lot of reds. Our opponent is kind of forced to take 3 blues, because if they don't, this means that we don't discard anything, and they probably win. Wait, or maybe, what if they take 2 gold instead, and they go here and they score 6 points? So 7 for actual scoring and 1 discard. And so suddenly we're tied. Then you take blues for 0 points because that's your only reasonable option. Oh, that's actually -1 point. That's actually -1 point. Yeah, that's true. Because you'll be making 1 and losing 2. So you're already at -1. And they have 5 reds remaining, but the problem with the reds is that the discard is not gonna be that bad for them. They're gonna take the 5 reds here, that's gonna score 3 points, and they're gonna discard 3 points as well. Oh, that's unfortunate, and you're gonna be losing the game by 1 point. And it's something that you gotta figure out. Which is tricky, which is really tricky to figure out. So I wonder if there's a different thing that we can make. Well, yes, there is, of course. What am I thinking about? Okay. I think maybe we can win. Okay, we're now at +7. We go here, they go here. We're tied. And then instead of 1 gold, well, I was thinking 1 gold, we can just take the 1 blue. Right? And we can go here and not lose anything. And let's say we're still at +7. And our opponent, I guess, is in a bit of a pickle. Or are they? Because now what they can do, they can now start relying on discards. They can take 2... yeah, that's the thing. They can take 2 blues away from us. And let's say put them just here. Then they're threatening the 3 golds, in which case we have to take the 3 golds ourselves and discard them over here for -5. Putting us at +2. Then they're left with the 5 reds, which go here. But now they don't discard that much. They take 3 points for that row, and they lose 2, so they take 1. Wait, do we still win by 1 point? Oh, actually, I didn't realize that when doing my initial analysis. Yeah, one thing that I overlooked is that they're actually going to be scoring 3 points for red, because in this scenario, the blacks here are going to be filled. And so this here gonna work. Yeah, so actually I don't think that we can win. Wait. No, wait, what I was saying. Yeah, I think we're winning this. Again, let's just run this through. So I'm double checking again that we're up 7 points. Again, -2 on the scoreboard, -1 here, +5 from here, +5 from here. We're +7 points. Whites go here for 9. Blacks go here for 9. We take 1 blue for 0. And then there's just nothing good that they can do. There's also another option that maybe they can like place blues here, or they can take gold here, but just none of that works. None of that works. Because you see, we don't discard enough if we go for this. And also, I believe if we go here, and if they don't take the blacks, then we just win because we have too many points. Because we're just going to take away the blacks away from them on the next move. Yeah, I think actually finishing the game here is winning. But it is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive. Oh, that's why they... No, they go for it regardless. So yeah, so I don't blame you for not finding the winning move. I also missed that initially. And also, it's not a bad thing that you did because you're still threatening to win on the next turn. Now they know for sure because they have no option to have the black. Now they really need to continue with the white. And now, of course, but now there's another problem. Now you're gonna discard the reds, which actually makes sense. Yeah. And now you give them the second column, which is fine because they're gonna discard some more. Okay, this is really why would they do that? I think they made a rather horrible mistake here. So I think they're just getting married to their row 1 a little bit too much. But if they're threatening a second column, like, why not just go for it? Oh, I guess the reason is that they want to have their row 3 open for potential gold, but I don't know about this. Like, going for a high scoring move with the 3 gold here just makes more sense. It's 6 points. It's setting up this here nastiness. And they still have an option to do something nasty here if they so choose. This is just for the sake of completing the row 1, but it's not going to be always possible because you're going to be taking away blues from them and they need blues in 2 spots. So if I were them, I would just forget about the top row and try to go for the second column in round 5 instead, especially since I'm going to prioritize row 5 because the row 5 gives me complete color on the whites. See, a rather odd sequence here. And also, another problem with their move is that they're going to be discarding more, because surely they're not going to place the reds in row 3. But they do, which is bad. Like, it's just so bad. So they now have no threats. Like, this red on a wet board like this has just like no synergy whatsoever. They're not threatening anything. They're just clogging up their row. And yeah, it appears to be a rather hefty oversight. But also you get like the best run up in the world, run out in the world. You get yourself the 1 blue. And you're gonna finish row 5. Okay, Glovier is saying, what if they take 1 gold after they take 1 white? I double check my settings to stream without delay. I hope I'm still doing this. I know what you're referring to. You know, let's go back there. And I'm going to answer your question like right after. I'm going to have a look at that round 5 again. Yeah, and then obviously there's just no way you're losing this, right? Because you're taking away the top row and you have just way too many threats. So you're threatening complete color here. You're actually still actively threatening the second column here as well. And you do find a very neat way of finishing this. I actually really like your move here. Taking the 1 white. Oh, is that okay? Yeah, that's also fine. I thought you were taking the 1 whites, but the idea is, of course, is to threaten something whilst also grouping things towards the center, and this is where they just resigned, because they're faced with a grim choice between discarding 4 blacks and we lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So like they're forced to either discard a lot of blacks or just allow you to complete your row 4 and get complete color. And either choice is rather grim. Although I guess they could still take the 1 white and hope that you make a mistake. But then even if you do, okay, you go here with blacks. And then take 1 red, you take 1 red, they take 1 black, you discard a bunch of stuff. You still, I think, wait. Can they still win this, actually? Let's say if they take 1 white. Then the move that you need to find that I think wins you the game is just taking 1 red. And in that case, you have 2 threats. You're threatening a red here for 6 points. And you're threatening, of course, complete color here for 11. and then they're forced to discard one of these things, and they just end up discarding everything. Yeah, that's a very easy win because they lose 14 and you get something regardless. But from their perspective, they can try to induce a mistake. Because if you go here, it is not unreasonable to just get happy and take the 4 blacks and go here and take the 12 points. But if that were to happen, you can still lose a bunch, because then they take the reds and go here. You take 1 red, they take 1 black, and then you're forced to discard the world. You're forced to discard up till here, because you're discarding the 5 gold. That actually makes it pretty interesting, and I think I don't even sure that you win there. So let's have a look at this. So the tops are going to be equal, and you're still at -8. Then they get 3 points from here, putting you at -11. -11, right? Then they lose 4 points here, putting you at -7. You get 1 and 2, that's 3. For the complete color bonus, you get 10, that's 13. So you get 13, you're +6, but then you lose a bunch of stuff here and you're -6. So actually, they now resigned, but it was a mistake from them. Because it's just super, super easy to induce a mistake there. So if they take the 1 white, then surprisingly, it would be losing for you to take the complete color. You would need to go for the standard tactic first. So I think they missed a chance to conduct a final test of their opponent and still manage to grab some success in this game. So these are the takeaways. Yeah, very exciting game. Now, a lot of this is really end game calculation. One, of course, takeaway. Well, let's just have a look at this. I remember them just resigning. Yeah. Yeah, them resigning. So they conceded because, of course, they are losing. But they're only losing if you find the best move, and the best move is not obvious. And so that's why they should have just had more grit about this, I guess. And then many, many interesting things. There are a lot of options for round 1, several places to consider, sacrificing row 2, then the endgame calculation in row 5, where I'm pretty sure that you were winning by 1 point, but it was such a difficult sequence to calculate, and we didn't even look through all of our opponent's responses, which, now that I think about it, I don't think any of them truly works. Because if they don't get the 2 blacks for the row 2 in round 5, then there's nothing really that can happen for them. Like, there's just no amount of discard that's going to compensate the lead that you had. So yeah, if you're not going to do a precise calculation, then the positional principles that you played, just like, drop the 1 black before it gets grouped, commit threats, force the game into 6th round. If you're going to force the game into 6th round, by the way, make sure that you are the starting player, which is exactly what you did. And then I think some mistakes from your opponents also helped. Anyway, yeah, congratulations on taking somebody this high rated. Their rating is like 750. And if you do have any additional thoughts on this game, just leave them in the chat if you're watching this in the recording. But we're going to be moving on to the next one. Or shall we? You know what? Let's just, we're having a long stream, so why don't we just go back to round 5? Let's just go to move 160. And see if there was indeed an alternative response for our opponents in the endgame. Because endgame calculation is something that I'm trying to get quicker at. I'm trying to find an alternative to painstakingly going through all the options, because sometimes there's simply not enough time to do that. There have to be some heuristics as well. Oh no, board game, you're gonna mess up. Yeah, they're just gonna mess with the visuals. Yeah, because they just don't reference tile. Whatevs. Basically, I'm like 99% sure that this was winning by 1 point for Devaka. If y'all do see an alternative sequence, how the Korean player could win in round 5 against us, if we were to actually at some point take the white and go here, allow them the 2 blacks, and then try to make them discard tiles with the standard tactics. If you have a remedy against that, then do let me know. But for our live viewers, I'm going to continue. Our next game is not less interesting. It was sent to us by Shubi, who's rated, or was rated at the moment, 527. It was a few weeks ago, so now they're rated much, much higher. I think even either close to or even over 700. So really quickly rising player. And we are playing against the Chinese player with a screen name Jez610, who's rated 938, which is 40 points above my peak. So it's going to be very high level game and a close one as well. And so to analyze properly, I'm going to need to have some hot beverages. So 2-minute break right now. So we're back for game 2. Shubi, our protagonist, and Jez610, the antagonist, 400 rating points rated above us. Now here the opening choice is pretty easy. This is the only group of 3 tiles, and it has actually some very nice synergy with, synergy potential rather. You know, 2 blues could go over here, and whites could go here, and reds could go here. If the 2 blues get taken away, it's quite easy to pivot with whites here and 2 blacks here. So lovely opening for us. Now our opponent should respond with, I don't know what exactly. My first instinct is to either whites or blues. Whites here do have a lot of merit. First of all, you create a direct threat which cannot easily be parried. They are threatening to complete their 4-row with whites, and if you are to take whites, then they're going to take 2 blacks for the row 5 with a starting tile. That's really annoying. And this is probably the best move. An alternative is to take the 2 blues and just place them in row 2, but I do like the option with the whites more, and this is exactly what they do. I don't really have great options here. Probably, maybe just going for the starting tile is fine. I don't like taking the whites here. I will probably just let them complete their row 4. Yeah, like if I take this, then suddenly I can go like this. If they take the whites... Oh, an alternative action, I can just take the blues. Yeah, that would be a real threat. So that would be... Yeah, okay, this is interesting. So if we take the blues, we're not threatening anything on row 4, but we're threatening to take the whites away and place them on row 5. So it kind of forces them to take the whites, and this allows us to take the 2 reds maybe here. Yeah, I would consider that. You take the whites, which is actually alright. I don't maybe like the fact that we're giving up a bit too easily this white plus black combo and the starting player option. But we do get some nice synergy for a column 4. And yeah, and we do actually have a slight advantage even. This is an interesting idea that you did, to place the 1 whites instead of the 2 reds on row 1. So the main idea here, is, of course, is to avoid losing floor line points, which I notice that as the level gets higher, the truly high-rated players really care about. So not losing floor line points is something that players care about at the 100 to 200 level and the 800, 900, 1000 level. The players who take care the least about the floor line, maybe the players like rated between 500 and 600. The one downside about this is that it is not possible to have a fully efficient setup anymore. What do I mean by fully efficient setup? Well, normally, with the exception of a few particular configurations, regardless of how disjointed your top 3 rows is, it's still possible to extract the maximum number of possible points. Eventually, just fill the gaps in the right order. So let's, for the sake of interest, assume that you have a configuration like this. And then you score only 1 and 1 and 1 point. So a total of 3 points. Instead of doing something like this, we score 3 points. We score 6 points. This actually is not a big deal at all if it just builds up properly. So the next tile group that you can take is maybe this in the second round for the blues, and then you take this, and then you take this, and on the next round you maybe fill this one, and this one, and on the next round you fill this and this and this. This is of course super optimistic, but the point is that regardless of how disjointed your tiles are, if you just follow them up properly in the future rounds, you can get the maximum, the theoretical maximum number of points possible. There are configurations which are exceptions. And this configuration that you're going to get is actually one of them. Now, why it is an exception? It is an exception because of these here 2 squares. Well, you know what? Let me just click the finishing of the round so that you can see this on the board a little bit better. Overall, of course, in this position, I would say a slight advantage for us regardless. But that points efficiency thing. Now, we want to be efficient when we can, with both our rows and our columns. In order to be efficient with our row 1, the next tile that we have to place here is black. If we place here anything else than black, then we don't get the full 15 points that we can for that top row. Or let's put it like this. So like for every row and every column that you're trying to fill in full, over the course of 5 rounds, the maximum is 15 points because you get 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5, if you fill them in that order. The reason why it's good to start from the center is just because it gives you more options to fill that way. For example, here, for the next tile to preserve maximum efficiency, you can either go here or here. Let's say you go here. On the 3rd round, you can either go here or here. And in the 4th round, you still have 2 options typically to go. So if you go straight from the middle, you do this, then this, and then this, and then this. In a variety of combinations, you get those 15 points. But so the power of starting in the center is not so much, it's not that the fact that you're getting more points immediately, is that you're getting flexibility. So you have a higher number of combos of tiles that you can use in order to complete the rows with the most efficient possible outcome of getting those 15 points. Or at the very least, you can threaten those 15 pointers over the course of 5 rounds. Now that you place a tile on the rim, which is still okay, also having a white here will serve you greatly because now you won't need to be too bothered about having whites in a lot of places, which is very often an issue if you build column 4 in particular, like the scarcity of whites. I have been burned by that very, very badly in the finals of the 2022 Mind Sports Olympiad, where I came 2nd because I didn't have enough whites. So in that sense, it's useful. But in terms of efficiency, so in order to continue your row 1 efficiently, you have to place the black here on the next turn. But if you want to complete your row, your column 4 efficiently, then you have to go from the center, which you have, but you kind of have to go outwards, right? And so you have to place the red before you place the black. Because let's say if you place the black first, it scores you 1 point vertically, and then red scores you 3 points vertically. And so you get 4. But ideally, you want to get 2 points for the red here vertically, and then 3 points for the black vertically, so that's 5. But now, you see what the problem is. If you place the black here, which you need efficiently for your row 1, then you're going to be placing the red after black. So you're bound to be inefficient with either your row or your column. So that's why this sort of setup is immediately... It's basically immediately the sacrifice of 1 point. Now, it's not such a big deal because there are good reasons to sacrifice 1 point, and it's nice to have the white here earlier. But it's just something to be aware of, because the more flexible your setup is in terms of threatening efficient buildups, well, the more threats you can create, the more your opponent is forced to react, and so on and so on. So that's just one main thing that I wanted to address about this. Now we can see the 2nd round being started. Our opponent, of course, is starting to take away white from us. Even though it's a tile group of 1, it's a critical group, and also they need to complete the row 3. This is a pattern that we've seen in a Queen Dong game that I analyzed on one of my most viewed videos on this channel 2 years ago. And you make something actually pretty interesting. So now try steal this from them. And now they don't worry about this. And the reason why they don't worry about this, because now we realize that if we take the white here, then they're now going to have 3 blues, and they're perfectly happy to sacrifice the row 4 temporarily just to have all that sweet efficiency. And so you end up with this. And then they complete their row 4 regardless. Until they don't. And I don't fully understand why exactly they made that decision. Maybe they want to take the blues away from you, which is something that makes sense, but then still row 3 is not your priority. I don't see exactly how you in this position managed to complete both rows 3 and row 4. But still, it's a move that does seem to make a lot of sense. Now, of course, I presume you're going to be taking 1 white away from them, yeah, because they're threatening way too much. Now, they take 1 blue. And you go for the standard tactic. And it almost looks like they're going to lose one of their rows because it's going to be saddled with the reds. The problem is that this is not true, because you cannot take gold away from them, which means that their row 2 is never in jeopardy. And so you take the reds, and they take the gold. They do discard some tiles, which is very nice for you. But in compensation, they have more stuff on their board. And just a generally efficient setup. Still, the 6 points is what makes this position still more preferable for you. Here they're probably going to be starting, oh yeah, okay, this makes way more sense. Of course, the blue is the critical element. You need it for both places. They need it here. We're running short on easy tile groups, and you're probably going to take, I mean, 1 white with a starting player does look pretty good. You decide to go for this. This is actually pretty interesting. Okay, that actually sort of works as well. Yeah, it's just very nice. Going for row 4 instead, denying them row 3. And then you also realize that you're not in such a big hurry to complete your row 5. First of all, there's still several tiles available to do that. And even if you don't get that, you already have 4 tiles there. You only need 1 extra for the remainder of the game. They take 1 white for the sake of efficiency, forcing you to discard if you want to go there. Now here my first instinct is to take 1 black just because it's so efficient to do. But since they don't need the 1 black anyway, anywhere else, I need to override my first instinct. So what's my second instinct? There are a lot of good things that I want to accomplish. I want to complete my row 4. I also want to complete my row 2 with either blues or whites. And I also want to deny my opponent row 3, where he could actually place 3 blues. And I also want to place reds here. So I'm wondering if taking the reds right here, right now, is a bad idea. And I don't think it is, because let's say if you take the reds and you go here, your opponent can do some annoying things. Maybe your opponent can do something like this, taking 1 gold and then grouping all the whites for you. But then, yeah, I just want to see what you did. So you go for the whites, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. That does make sense to me, because you are not allowing the whites to get grouped together, so it's a very nice positional principle. You're also keeping yourself the option of completing row 2 with whites, even though it's a bit inefficient. That would be completing the objective with your whites very early, and then also leaving the option of using the blues not for row 2, but as a group of 3 for row 3. And that would definitely compensate for this. But then I wonder if your opponent has some sort of counter. So what if they use the 2 gold here? And then maybe use 1 gold here. Then they take the whites here. And then you take 3 of something here. I just want to see what they did. Oh, this! So they want to keep their row 3 open. Yeah, that actually makes... That's a sort of less fancy way of doing things. But then... I keep wondering if that's necessary for them. I would still like to preserve the threat of completing my row 3 if I were them. I don't want to second guess their move too much simply because they're so high rated, so they could have calculated something that I haven't. It's just a move that I found a bit counterintuitive. But also, I guess what they want is that they want to get whites here. Ah, and then try to go for a second column like this, maybe looking to snatch some of these reds. This actually is pretty interesting. So let's see what you go for here. Wait. Is it crazy? Is it crazy to not use the blues in row 2? Is it crazy to actually just take the whites here and sacrifice a lot of efficiency simply for the sake of preserving the threat of putting 3 blues there? Because now they really don't have a lot of great use for the blues. You don't need to worry about row 1 anymore. Because you have 2 options for row 1. And then if you do go here, it's very difficult for your opponent to deny you row 3 properly. Because let's say if they do take the reds and start building row 5, then you can suddenly group a lot of blues together and then force to discard them 3 blues, which is going to be too much for them. If they discard 1 blue, then they group reds for you. Like, I think this is the move. It's counterintuitive, but I really think that taking the whites is all the rage in this position. You make this move, which makes all the sense in the world, but I really think the whites here was stronger, as counterintuitive as it seems. Still, like, solid principle. We go for efficiency. They take away... Wait, they take away the black. And, okay, now I'm a bit surprised. Because now that they take away the black, it seems to me that our move is pretty much forced. Then... yeah, I don't really understand this move here that you played. The move I would play, I just go for the standard tactic, take the 1 gold, go for efficiency, group 4 reds together, and then force them to discard a little bit, and also put them in an awkward position. Because first of all, they have to take 4 reds, otherwise you're going to take them for row 3. That's not what they want. If they take 4 reds, where do they put them? If they go here... they don't do a lot of good for them. It's just 0 points. In which case, you can be totally happy that they get saddled with these whites, which they could put here, but it's not as dangerous as it seems. If they put whites at the bottom and go for the second column idea, if they put reds at the bottom and go for this second column idea, you can just take the whites and go here. Even though it's a bit inefficient, given the substantial number of whites still remaining in the deck, you can totally afford that. But you went for this, which means that you're going to be discarding a little bit more. Yeah, wait. No. Oh, the problem with this move is that you're just going to be discarding 2 whites. Because your opponent can quite easily, yeah, you see, your opponent can do this. They don't even have to deny you the reds. And now you're forced to use the reds there. And now you... oh, I'm surprised that they didn't force you to discard more. Or whatever. But basically, you end up with just fewer points and more discarded tiles than you otherwise would have. So, if you're not sure, then really 90% of the time, the standard tactic, meaning, you know, the move which leaves only 3 in the deck, and sorry, not in the deck, I'm just thinking Carcassonne here. So if it leaves like only 3 tile groups in the center, like it's very, very often correct at the end of the round. There's some exceptions to this, especially in round 1, but like if you're in time trouble, this is very often the default move. Oh, hi, Daniel. saying, shouting at myself, don't do it. Well, this is your past self, though. In any case, we haven't seen like many really major blunders so far. Also, I like this move, for example. Yeah, and also, by the way, one of this move that you made, this one, it's actually going to make the whole position very interesting. So one of the reasons I really wanted to analyze this game on stream. Wait, let me just fix this out a little bit. And we should be back. Yeah, I do like the positional principle here. Taking the whites, not allowing our opponents to easily complete the row 3. Now, they can still do it, I guess. And they do it right now. But this gives us the starting player in round 5. Wait, let me think about this one, because this is a bit of a counterintuitive move to me. Like, why do we go here with the blacks? Why do we go there exactly with the blacks? No, it is intuitive enough, I guess. You do complete your column, and you also need to start using blacks because there are not that many of them remaining. You still need some blacks for your row 2 towards the end of the game. I'm just trying to think if there is a way to somehow try and fill in our row 5, because it would be nice to have those 2 points and not allow our opponent to have the blacks here. Like, that's the main problem with the run out this round, is all of these blacks. But for now, this move makes a lot of sense. Also, you're putting one blue in the center, so you're threatening to take a red, you're threatening to go here and group the 2 blues together and force them to go here and lose a blue, or if not, then you just take the blues here and they lose their row 1 with really not a lot of compensation. Let's see how they respond. They do take 1 blue, which makes a lot of sense. It's also quite interesting when I look at these high-rated players, they second-guess themselves much more often than your average player. Like, they're going to make a move, but they're going to do this back and forth more times. Take away what you will from that. Now. Now this is the one move that, remember, that wasn't quite a fan of. Yeah. I think I remember what you did there. So intuitively, the move which I don't want to make is... No, let's just talk about the move that I do want to make. My instinct says to me either something like this, just taking the points and then throwing the ball to our opponent, in which case, yeah, but then if they do this, then there's another problem. No, they take the 3, then they take the 3 blacks here, and then we're kind of forced to take the reds here and discard a lot. But then if we do that, it's a whole other problem. Yeah, there's actually not that many easy decisions. But how about we take the... Oh, I know! How about we take the reds here and go like this? And we do discard a little bit. But we make it so that our opponents cannot hurt us on the floor line anymore. Because if they go for the standard tactic, if they take 1 red, which is sort of the natural move, then they group 5 blacks for us, which is exactly what we want. So we take the 5 blacks, and even if they take away those golds from us, we're going to have only 1 row clogged, we're going to be discarding just 1 more tile, and most importantly, we're going to be denying them this here situation. This is probably what I would have gone for, because the thing is, this here move, it gives them back the world. I do understand it's a very nice idea in a sense, and you discard less, but your opponent also scores more. And I do feel that they benefit from this. Like, this is just so painful. Again, why are they thinking about this? Like, I don't get this. Like, why are they doing this back and forth? It's the world. Because now we need to continue with our plan. But they now get to get the 3 reds, which are also valuable for them. Which is why it wasn't such a bad idea to discard them. And we get a bit of an unusual position where we play and let's play. And we get the threat of a second column. And our opponent gets the threat of a second column. Now, the good thing for us is that we're still ahead on the scoreboard, at least for now. And that there are a lot of blues to threaten our column in the first place. And also that we're fortunate enough. Well, actually, no, it's not. It's nothing about fortune. There are blacks. Well, basically, the blacks are distributed really, really well. But I wouldn't call it good fortune, because with 4 tiles remaining, a distribution of 2-1-1 is in fact the most likely distribution. I don't know the exact percentage. I guess you're going to have to ask the reigning world champion, Sunny Cheng, who I think did calculations about this. This is one element in his game that I really need to catch up with, because he had done a lot of analysis as to, like, for example, if you have a 4 of certain color, or 5 of certain color, or 6 of certain color, which are the most and least likely distribution of this color across plates. I neglected this component of the game for a long time, because typically I don't want to rely on probabilities. I want to, let's say, imagine the worst case scenario and prepare myself for the worst case scenario, but sometimes it is not possible. Sometimes you need to just try and figure out what's going to be the most likely run out. And this is, in fact, the most likely run out, the 2-1-1. And for 5, I think it's 2-2-1. So you make the most natural move. And it looks like it is going to be pretty close. Now, they do get their second column, so it looks just amazing. But I'm going to tell you what my intuition says me. Actually, no. There's several objectives that we have. What exactly do we go for? So ideally, we really want to threaten our column 5. If we do it right now, if we go for column 5, let's say here, also grouping these whites is going to be quite helpful. Now, if they do take away the column away from us with these here blues, they don't score anything, and we get the gold here and go here. And then with these top rows and our slight scoreboard lead, we're actually outrunning their second column, because they don't have anything else to score with. Okay, actually they do. They have this here thing, the 4 reds, but that's about it. So what else can we do? Do we win if we just ignore the column for now and try to threaten it a little bit later? What if we just take the 1 gold right now? The idea behind this move is just to take care of our objectives a little bit early. It is also to prevent the 3 gold being grouped together, because our opponent could snatch it quite powerfully for their row 3. Now, of course, there is an exact calculation how to do this. You can just run across all the variations, but still, even in the last round, I want to first abide by positional principles and just calculate the most obvious line first, the most natural line, and see if we win there. It's also quite useful to have the point count available right now. So let's have a look. So we are 2 points ahead. We have 5, 9, 11 extra for this here area, so we're 13, and they have 7 and 7, 14 extra at the bottom, right? Because they completed their column now. So actually, we're down 1 point. So it's a very even game so far. We're down 1 point. So if we go here with 1 gold, we're take 2, 4, 9. Yeah, we take 9 points. We're up 8 points. And it is our opponent's turn. And there's not a lot that they can do. I do think that we end up winning. And this is simply due to the nature of additional threats that we have. It is quite difficult for our opponents to fully prevent the threat of us going for this here column. Because if they take only 2 blues away from us, we have a secondary threat of going with the blues over here. And these 6 points can be just enough to put us over the edge. So let's try and calculate this variation through again. So we go here, we're at what, +8. And then if they go with their natural move, taking 1, yeah, actually, but the 1 white is not even good enough for them. If they take the 1 white, it's only give them 7 points. So they're still behind and we're still the side with the threats. And then if that happens, we can just take 2 blues and go here, create the threat of completing the column. It sort of forces them to take the blues here. Then we can take the blacks away from them because there's still 2 blacks with which they can go here. And then I don't think there's anything else. Now, there are, of course, the 4 reds, which is a bit of a problem. But if these 4 reds do happen, then they take 3 points here, which means that we're going to be at what? +1, -2. And then we're going to be trying to make up for these 2 points on the floor line. Wait, let me just try and think about this again. So this gold goes here. If they take this here, white, we take these blues. Yeah, they're going to be losing this. They're going to be having 3 blues here because they have to. We're going to having 2 blacks somewhere here. They're going to be having... Oh, but that's the thing. They cannot use the 4 reds productively anymore. So then the best that they can do is go here for 0 points. Yeah, that's the main thing about threatening the 5th column. Is that this threat of scoring 3 points with the 4 reds is actually pretty good, normally. Because in a close game, 3 points can absolutely put them over the edge. But then, if they do that, they would need to discard the blues. Yeah, that's the thing. They actually need to keep their row 4 open for the blues. It's also possible to just make a more straightforward approach. We can just go with the blues here, then they go with the blues here, and then we take the 1 gold for a standard tactic. But then I don't want to calculate this too hard, because now I start wondering, is there a scenario? And I think the answer to that is yes. Is there a scenario where we do get the blues here and we get the gold here, but we still lose because our opponent completes these here 2 things? The answer, no. I think it's still no. I think we have actually multiple winning moves here. I think that taking this blue here also works. Because, yeah, with these blacks, we're going to be scoring more than they score with their blacks. That's the thing, because we have all these extra bits here. So that is quite useful. And also, even with the golds, we're going to be scoring a little bit more than they, because with the golds we score 9 here, and with the whites they score 7. And these small differences are going to add up. But the main thing, if you don't want to calculate lines, you just go through principle. So you look at the last round, and you look at all the tiles, and look at where they fit. Let's start color by color. So gold. 1 gold fills here. Let's actually write this down. Let's figure out. So gold. Like, what's threatening? So we're taking 1 threat here, and 3 golds fit here. So let's say this is a color which is equally threatening for both of us. Alrighty, so blues. Blues fit 4 blues fit here, but then 4 blues fit here, and 3 blues fits here as well. So in terms of blues, we have 2 threats, and our opponent has 1. Whites and blacks, it's not a great situation. White, our opponent has 1 threat, and we have 0. Then blacks, again, our opponent has 1 threat, and we have 0. Because this goes here, this goes here. So, and then reds. I guess red goes here for 1 point, which is probably not game decisive, but we can still count that in, sort of, kind of. And then red goes here for 3 points. So now, if you look at this configuration, we need to first exclude whites and blacks, because this is a color which is threatening for them, but not for us. And we gotta prioritize the color which both of us needs. We can also exclude reds pretty easily because they're not even grouped together. They're not even close to becoming a threat, so it's a threat for later in the round. So, and also, we cannot fill our row 4 with the reds right now. So we're not going to be grabbing any of the whites. We're not going to be grabbing any of the reds. Now, it's a question between grabbing the golds and the blues. And the thing with the blues, it's a good move, and I think it's winning. But intuitively, it seems like the second choice. Now, if we take the blues here, what's going to happen? We are going to deny them row 4 with the blues immediately. So we're going to neutralize one of the threats that they have, whilst also creating a threat, but not fulfilling it. So we're going to create a threat and neutralize. So it's a good thing. But if we take the gold, we fulfill one of our threats and we deny them another threat. So in terms of the number of threats, in terms of the impact, taking the 1 gold is the single most impactful move that you can make right now. So this is how you can arrive at this conclusion. And then also your intuition can develop accordingly. But if you just look at all the color options, and then you just simply list the number of threats, then you can already exclude a couple of options. So you don't want to go for the tile which only you need, unless it's super impactful, unless it's so impactful that your opponent would be justifiably willing to spend a move on just discarding that tile. And then also you want to, later when you have several options which are threatening for both you and your opponent, you just look through the impact of the threats. And actually, you know, like the goals that fit in all these criteria, because the 6 here, the 6 points for this is about the best that your opponent can do. So yeah, taking the 1 gold is indeed winning here. And this is actually something that you did tell me in your message when sending this game, but or maybe you were speaking about 1 gold a couple of moves later. I didn't quite understand, because I think 1 gold a couple of moves later might also have been winning. I don't quite remember, but it's winning right now. I'm just trying to sort of create a logic how you can, without super deep calculation, try and find the move which is usually correct in situations like this. So you sort of look at which colors are threatening. Yeah, this move is still winning, I'm pretty sure. Your opponent does this. Yeah, okay, this makes perfect sense, because your opponent is forced to neutralize. And then again, if we take the 1 gold, we'll just kind of recalculate this very quickly. If I remember correctly, in this situation we're at -1. If we take the gold here, it gives us +9, so it puts us at +8. And your opponent is going to lose a tile for taking the starting player token. So that's already going to put us as +9 rather. And then your opponent just simply does not have enough threats anymore. Because if they take the blacks, you take away the whites, or vice versa. And then if they take away the reds, which they kind of have to, they get 0 points. And then you take the blues. And then they just don't have threats anymore. And they even need to discard something. Yeah, they actually end up discarding 2 golds. How interesting. So you end up winning with like plus 11 here. Yeah, and also, like, even if you don't know, I mean, this is also one of those cases with the standard tactic, making sure that there's an odd number of tile groups remaining on your opponent's turn at the end of one of the later rounds, happens to be, again, correct. So, just some heuristics. Daniel is saying, brace yourselves, the biggest blunder in history of AZUL. Oh, I've seen worse on stream, so don't you worry about that. And also, I've gotten used to way worse blunders in Carcassonne. And you see, I see what you did, because you wanna deny your opponent the threat that they immediately have. The threat that they have is to finish their row 1. But all you need to realize is that that threat was not that big, and that you finishing your row 1 is more impactful than your opponent finishing his row 1. Because now they have a pretty easy move how they can create both threats at once. I'm pretty sure they're going to find it. Yeah, with the 1 black, right? I don't think it actually matters even that much. And here's the problem. If you take away the yellows from them, no, wait. So you can't take away blacks from them, because they're going to take away yellows and you're going to discard 4 reds. So your only move is to take away yellows, which also going to lose you a couple of points in the floor line. They're going to finish their blacks regardless. So you spending a move on neutralizing one of their top rows didn't work, because they finished one of their top rows regardless. And yeah, as you can see, somehow your opponent is going to miraculously win this one. So we had a chance to make quite the rating upset and make a lot of rating ourselves as well. But it is what it is, a loss by 2 points in a position which also very interesting imbalance, where you both didn't block each other a lot for a long time. It has been working out as you have been both creating the threats of the columns, even though your opponent was the first to complete their columns. The fact that you have been more efficient, the fact that you had fewer discarded tiles, the fact that you didn't sacrifice any rows, unlike your opponent, still puts us in a winning position. And then just simply this missed win towards the end, which we knew in advance. But yeah, so I guess takeaways are, just look at the colors in terms of the number of threats that they have per side. That can help with prioritizing. And another move, like, very often, consider the standard tactic first. If it doesn't work, then consider something else. Alrighty, well, thank you for sending this game. By the way, for the rest of you, if you do want your games to be featured in the next episode, then you can contact me either on Board Game Arena via private message or via the channel email address. I should be able to have more room for AZUL content in the next 1.5 months for sure, as the World Team Carcassonne Online Championship is coming to an end. But before our 3rd game, which is tremendously exciting because both players here are rated around 100, including our protagonist Faubar, who sent this. I first of all have to say that the level of play seems to be significantly higher here, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. This is one of the most extraordinary games I've ever seen, according to some metric, according to multiple metrics. So this should be fun. But before that, as usual, hot beverage break. So I'm gonna see you in 2 minutes. And we're back for our game 3. So Faubar is now our protagonist. But our opponent, also rated I think only slightly over 100, is to go first. And it's a very wet board. It's a lot of groups of 3. A couple of groups of 2. Very synergistics, lots of threats that we can accomplish. Probably going with the whites for row 3 makes the most sense. Our opponent goes for the blacks first. They go for row 4, which also actually makes sense. They're trying to threaten the blacks over here. And if we take the 3 blacks, which we have to, then they're going to take the 1 white and put over here, complete the row 4 and get the starting player. It's actually a very nice combination from them. And our options are not great. I'm thinking blacks over here, so that when they complete the row 4, we can also complete our row 4 with the blacks as well. But if I remember correctly, go for row 3, which also actually makes some sense. Even though it's normally not such a great idea to start with the column 1, it can work surprisingly well, because you see you have some gold here, which you can use here. The one downside, of course, is that with the blues, we don't have great use for them, because we do need the blues. But actually, you know what? No, with blues, we can just go here right now. We really, really should. Yeah. Our opponent needs the blues to threaten row 3, to threaten row 2, and if we go for the blues right now, we're going to have a very flexible setup. So these 3 blacks, they can either contribute towards column 1, or they can just contribute towards adjacency bonuses if we end up pivoting to column 2, which we could do in future rounds, given the fact that 18 reds are still in the bag. You go for 1 gold, which is definitely a mistake here, but the main principle that you gotta observe is that you gotta take the most competitive tile groups. And first of all, gold is the most abundant element. If you're gonna go for gold, then you gotta take this first, but then typically you want to go for rare elements first, especially ones which your opponent needs. So do 2 blues here were stronger. Yeah, and typically, generally, in the first round, you don't want to be playing 1 tile over here. You want to maybe fill in the top rows first, and then put 2, 3, or 4 tiles in one of the bottom rows when more tiles converge. Yeah, because you see your opponent is now building row 3, and again, this is a threat that you should have reacted to. Just try and pay attention a bit more to what your opponent is doing. So rather than getting simply 1 gold here, it was much, much better to deny your opponent the row 3 and place the 1 blue over here, which you need for a column anyway, and also just to get your first row, so that it's important that you simply continue it's important that you simply just get a point for row 1. It doesn't have to be super efficient. This is also another imprecision. You do really kind of hammer down the point of continuing the column, which is something that I see a lot. But what you really should do is you try fill in your rows 1 and 2. And after you play this move, you go for the standard tactics. But again, the standard tactic is something good to have in future rounds. In the first round, you want to have the standard tactic placed against you so that you get more stuff on your wall. Now what's going to happen, your opponent is going to finish their rows 1 and 2, and you're going to only finish, well, 1 of these 2 rows, and so you're going to be sacrificing 1 of the rows with not a lot of compensation. But what happens next, what happens in future rounds, is enabled by this row 1 sacrifice. Also, your opponent now makes a mistake, as well, they should, even as nice as this looks, still completing row 1 is way, way, way better. And now they're going to have 4 rows completed against your 2. They would have just a huge advantage against you. Now it's just kind of an advantage. And they also are the starting player, and they get, I think, a mistake. So the blacks make a lot of sense, but again, prioritization, they should have just used the whites here, because you need the whites, they need the whites. It's wonderful. But I presume they can allow you to take the whites, And that is because they want to use the golds for row 3. Anyway, so we do have some natural moves, and again, just one thing that I'm seeing from you. So these moves all make sense. You just got to prioritize large tile groups first. So it's kind of a bit unusual how these whites get ignored. They're so good for you. They're kind of good for your opponent, but they're so much better for you because you could score 5 points with the whites and the blues here. They're so perfect. And your row 1, you can finish later because there are plenty of blues. And worst case scenario, you can just put something else in row 1, and then on the next round, you can put the blues here. Yeah, so they now continue with the row 5, grouping a lot of stuff in the center. And this is, again, you really should go for the whites, but you go for the blues, which is not that great because they actually don't need the blues anywhere. So you got to be taking either the white or the golds because this is something that both you need. Now, what you took now, first of all, you took your best tile group for your row 2, because that's the most efficient. That's the one that scores the adjacency bonuses. And you took the tile group which your opponent does not need. But in any case, your opponent gets the good stuff, and you go here. And now, at the very least, you get yourself something nice. I'm not sure if you had calculated this, but now this already looking not that bad at all. With these 4 whites, you do get actually a lot on your wall this round, still trailing, but already multiple threats. Of course, this here column, but suddenly the threat of another column emerges. Now, your opponent, I think, is misprioritizing a little bit. They take the 1 red when there are plenty of reds available, and they're also giving you the option of taking 2 blues with a starting tile. But you go for the reds, which makes a lot of sense. You want to finish your row 4. The unfortunate a bit situation is that you give them the blues, but that's all right. We're going to be just continuing with those reds, as we should, because our opponent has good use for reds in this place. Now it would be very nice to take away the golds from your opponent. I think the best way to do that, it's a bit counterintuitive, so I don't blame you if you don't find it. This move seems natural, but I would go here, discard 1 gold for the sake of better adjacency bonuses, and prepare to take either 2 blues or 2 reds here for maximum adjacency bonuses on row 2. You do this first, which sort of makes sense, but then it allows your opponent to complete this stuff, but now you can pivot a little bit. So probably, now that you know that you have these here tiles for row 1, your best shot is to use the blues here. Even though it sort of kind of disrupts your column, you really need this defensive move, because if they get the blues here, then suddenly they're threatening another column, and that's not great. Also, with these here golds, they have a not so high, but still I think realistic chance of getting the complete color, because I don't remember gold tiles being discarded, which means that there's still 5 remaining in the deck, and if you're not careful, they're going to get all 5 of them. But all you need to do is to disrupt their plans is just get 1 gold here at some point, and then they're going to not have enough to go for this row 5. With that complete color threat that they have, it's something to mildly be aware about. Now, your opponent also makes a mistake. They go for row 3, which makes a lot of sense, but threatening another column was, in fact, stronger. There's still a sizable number of reds and, of course, a decent number of moves remaining, a decent number of blues remaining to try and fill that second column. And so it forces you, and it kind of ends up what this sequence would have been if both sides played correct. They take 1 white, which makes a lot of sense. Now you're probably going to continue with the blues, which also makes sense a lot of, well for you, that's very nice prioritization, actually, because you take the stuff that you need, and you also take away the stuff that they need, because they're threatening all kinds of nasty stuff with the blue on these heroes. They take the black, which also makes a lot of sense, that their high scoring move. Now you're going to take the 2 blues, I hope, and you don't, which, again, it's a move that makes sense, but it's not the priority move. Like, this sort of stuff you can do later. There's still a lot of whites remaining. There's still, you can also use reds or golds if you need over here. Now, the merit of your move to do this earlier, the merit of that move is the fact that you still allow technically the threat of 3 whites going here, so you do this before the whites are grouped, but this is kind of moot because your opponent, if they know their stuff, they're going to be placing the whites here. And it's a natural move for them because this is the only group available for them to complete their row 2. And then in that case, well, I guess you're going to take the blues then, and you're going to saddle them with 7 reds, but 7 reds is actually not that much because they're only going to be losing a little bit on the floor line. They start filling their floor, which I think is a bit too premature. Yeah, and they now continue here, and now you presume you take the... Okay. Yeah, that totally works. Kind of putting some pressure there. Trying to make them discard a little bit more. And now you try and take away a valuable tile group for them. And it looks like a move which doesn't work, but in fact it does. I do like your move here with the 1 black. I like the fact that you didn't discard it. Even though it disrupts the options for our column. Well, actually, now, wait, now I have second thought about it. Yeah. Now I have second thoughts about it. Maybe you should have taken 1 gold there. I don't know. No, your move is fine. Your move is fine. Because obviously you need the golds for the top row. You're not going to finish that column anyway, at least not this round. Anyway. Yeah, so this actually is a good move. It's quite a high-level move, because the intuitive move is to discard, but here it actually works, so you can threaten this hero. Now, your opponent has a very easy win there. All they need to do is just get themselves the black tiles and win the game. They're ahead 18 points. You have roughly equality on the board. Like, yeah, you can get this, but you just can't get enough to outrun all their stuff. But if that were to happen, this game would not have made it into the video. Your opponent is, in fact, does not take the blacks. Instead, they goes for the golds, which looks a lot of sense because they're trying to disrupt your stuff. But this allows you to go for the blacks and continue that row, and also possibly deny them row 1. They take 1 gold, and so do you, I presume. No, you take 1 red. Whatever, that's also fine. Trying to just consolidate your position. And now they take 2 reds. But then again, they still had the win there. The move that they needed to play is that they needed to play this 1 black, so that you take the other black, and then they guarantee themselves another black, and finally win here. So all they needed to do is just end the game. Make the game end. But they did not do that. Instead, they try to fill the reds, which now allows you to continue at the top. And this, again, makes sense. And again, now, they could have just ended the game. If they take these here moves, these here tiles, they're doing fine. They're scoring 7 points, ending the game, and winning. Because they had so much on the scoreboard. But they don't. They instead take the blues. I'm not sure what's the motivation. Maybe they didn't count points. Maybe they wanted to have a bit more fun. But this fun cost them because you take the blacks. And suddenly you're not going to lose, at least not this round, because they're not finishing the game because they have nothing to put here. So we are in fact moving to a further round. They really want to prioritize that row 4. Of course, you take 1 more black, and they do this, and they set up their complete color. You need to discard a little bit, but now your position is suddenly considerably better. You're 19 points behind, but you're threatening multiple options for complete color. you're threatening blacks over here. There's lots of blacks. Blues over here is a lot of blues. You're threatening another column with the golds over here and a row over here. So you have a lot of high scoring setups. Your opponent, again, can crush all those dreams by just taking these blacks and finishing the game. But surprise, surprise, or maybe at this point, not so much of a surprise, they don't. You see, they get tunneled on their own board, and they see all those golds, and they see that you need a gold, perhaps, but most importantly, they see that they need a gold to complete their coveted complete color, and they do exactly that. That's again a prioritization mistake. So even like for beginners, if there's a tile, like one single tile, which you really need, but there's two of them, you can delay it and take the tile which you kind of need first. So you go not so much by the importance of tiles, which is of course a consideration, but you go for availability of tiles. So you take the rare important tile first, then you take rare not that important, and only then you take important and then not rare, and then you finish up with tiles which are rare, and not important. But we continue. This of course allows us to complete our complete color and also group some blues for us with which we can threaten the complete color further. Your opponent gets one red. Now you take one blue, which actually makes sense because you want to guarantee yourself a complete color. Your opponent continues. You're probably going to take one more blue. And we have multiple complete colors, and your opponent now groups things. Now the question that we need to decide first, we're down 19 points on the scoreboard, but we have all these extra things. So at this point, we gotta count, does finishing the game win it for us? And I think the answer is yes, but I want to check that first. So the natural move to consider here is to take this gold and to go here. In that case, the standard tactic occurs. Your opponent's going to need to use 3 tiles, 3 tile groups, whereas you're going to need to use only 2, which means that you discard these 2 blues, and your opponent discards all of these whites. And so if that were to happen, let's just calculate what occurs. So first of all, 19 points on the scoreboard is your lead. On the floor line, let's calculate that first. They have -14, you have -2, so they're -12, meaning that they're going to be at +7 before the other points on the board are counted. At the top, for this, you're going to get 9, and they're going to get 4. So that's already 5, putting them at +2. Then here, they're going to get 6, putting them at +8. Here, you're going to get 4, putting you at -4. And here, you're going to get 3, putting you at -1. But then, we count all the bonuses. Well, I did include already the bonus for the line. You have the same number of columns, but you have 2 complete colors. And they have only 1 complete color on the yellows. So you would actually be winning this +9. So what you had to do is just calculate that, or maybe you even intuitively can figure out, because if you go here, they lose so much on the floor line, then that it almost compensates for the scoreboard difference, and then you can kind of gauge that the fact that you have 2 complete colors and you have these extra 10 points should put you over the edge. But maybe you weren't sure about the math, maybe it was hard to visualize, and if anything, it's good that you did not do that, because then this game would not have made it into the video. Your opponent drops this tile. You're both now going to discard quite a bit. And it's almost doesn't matter the order in which you discard tiles, because neither of you can fill anything. I guess discarding blues last is the better option. And so now you're down 23 points. And we're now in round 7, which I have had only maybe like once in my career personally. I don't think I've ever gotten to round 8. If somebody in the chat gotten to round 8, do let me know. If you have the link to that game, I'd love to see it. Also, just curious, what's the largest number of rounds that you've seen? Anyway, so our opponent is 23 points behind on the scoreboard. And they have a threat to complete themselves another column. And they get to go first. We do have 10 points extra for the complete color, but it looks like it's not going to be enough. Or is it? Our opponent starts building up their column. We start building up our own stuff, and that's correct. Let's just let them do what they want to do. We finish a row 3, and we finish the game. This is not often that the first completed row is not row 1 or row 2. They finally get their setup. They get their second column and also 9 points straight up to begin with. But it groups the gold for us, and it allows us to grab 10 points and another row and another column. They try to discard, or maybe not. No, they just misclicked. They want to continue their own stuff. And now you found a beautiful move. An intuitive move here, of course, is just to take the gold because we need it. Or maybe a more savvy player will observe that we actually need the 5 reds over here to complete the column and to also get ourselves a third complete color on the reds. But you now decided that you want to do both of these things at once. So that's a very nice find. And also at this level, it's actually very, very impressive. Because a reminder for those of you who are just joining, this is like on a 100, 150 level. So it's really impressive stuff. And you now group the 5 reds together, threatening for the reds to go over here. And also your opponent cannot do nothing much about it because they're forced to discard all of those reds, which is technically still the correct move for them. But no player at the 100, 150 level is actually going to figure out that discarding 5 tiles is the move which scores them the most, or rather loses them the least. So they make a natural move. They just take the whites, because this is the only thing that fits. And it also looks kind of pretty because they're almost completing their column, but almost doesn't count because there's not going to be another round. And of course, you're going to snatch the reds, scoring 8 points for placed tiles, 7 points for the column, and 10 points for the complete color. That is, my friends, a 25-point move with just one click of the mouse. Now, this does not change the outcome of the game. I guess your opponent would have lost by... Well, actually, your opponent would have saved like 15 points or something like this. Hi, Napalm. But yeah, now you can see the points counted. And you're going to see something absolutely obscene. Our protagonist, who has been behind for most of the game, and could finish it and win with a few points in round 6, wasn't sure and waited until round 7, and in round 7 won with 27 points, 25 of which were made on their last move. But that's not all. So first of all, I haven't really seen a game where anybody would score 127 points. I have barely seen anybody score 100 points, let alone the losing player. Imagine scoring 100 in AZUL and still losing. I've only scored over 100 just a couple of times in my lifetime, probably under 5. And needless to say, that was in winning games, not in losing games. So if you're aware of a higher losing score than this, then do let me know. And also do let me know if you're aware of a higher winning score than 127. But there is more. Another thing that I've never seen is this here stuff. Faubar has almost an entirely complete wall. Almost everything, just 2 squares missing. And this is something that's truly, truly remarkable, because the norm is just to finish like without 8 squares, or even without 10 squares in some cases. But to just finish with everything, with 23 squares out of 25, even though it took him 7 rounds, is still honestly as impressive as it gets. And I hope that you've enjoyed this game as much as I did. So that's a reward for those of you who stayed until the end, through the more technical parts of this analysis. I will be planning to deploy more AZUL content in the process, in the upcoming weeks, as the World Team Carcassonne Online Championships comes to an end. Just want to do a bit of advertising here that let's see that there's an AZUL Cup going on. Oh wait, or maybe isn't. Huh. Yeah, I will need to look up that website again. But basically, as many of our viewers will know, there's like a turn-based AZUL tournaments between countries going on, and it's an interesting event. I won't be able to cover it because it's turn-based, but maybe some of y'all would like to participate, so do message me on Board Game Arena, or just comment on this video if you're watching this after, if you haven't heard of this or are interested. There are like around 30 countries participating. Another thing that I'm going to say, if you enjoyed this sort of things, make sure to subscribe for more competitive AZUL content. Even though this channel is mostly devoted to competitive Carcassonne, I try to keep like a reasonable 80-20 Carcassonne to AZUL proportion whenever I can, and post fairly regularly when I can. There's going to be more games against viewers, some pre-recorded footage that I already recorded and just need to edit a little bit, and of course these here game analysis series. If you have any questions about anything that has just happened, make sure to drop a comment in the floor line. Yeah, and also if you're here just for AZUL, consider Carcassonne as well. These games have a lot of similarities, and there's also a lot of overlap between these competitive players. My goal is to make that overlap even bigger, to introduce more Carcassonne players to AZUL, introduce more AZUL players to Carcassonne, and there is no better way to get introduced to another game than by watching a competitive tournament. So since the World Team Carcassonne Online Championship is not over, I'm streaming tomorrow and the day after, together with a high caliber special guest, the semi-finals of the ongoing Carcassonne World Cup. So make sure to join me there as well. I think I've said everything that I've had to say. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you soon.